All right. Hello, everybody. This is my first attempt at trying to make some kind of video teaching something, whatever, uh, while we're all stuck at home doing what we're doing. So you have assignments that are due this week about monopolistic competition and oligopoly. I'm going to try to make a couple just kind of short videos about it, um, kind of follow my PowerPoint and just some of the key points that'll come up. So it's my first try doing it. Let's see how it goes. Let's try it. Okay, so I'm going to run down just some of the key characteristics in the first part and second part, just about the graphs, doing long run, short run graphs. So remember, monopolistic competition, goods are different. It's easy to enter an X's market, not a lot of barriers to entry. That means it's kind of like monopoly and also kind of like perfect competition. It's something kind of in the middle. So in the PPT that I had, I kind of broke it down like this. You know, there's number of sellers. So there's quite a few number of sellers. Most of the world is kind of made up of just lots and lots of many sellers because there's low barriers to entry. Any money can be made. People will enter the market or leave the market. Substitutes are imperfect. There's lots and lots of choices. You can buy the blue one, the red one, the green one, whatever. That's a key point. Weak barriers to entry. That's why there's so many people. When it gets to this, when it gets to pricing and efficiency, those are the 2 points that are kind of harder to get to. Let's get the graphs to do those. So some basic vocabulary issues. Okay, it is recording. So just going a little bit deeper with some of these things, just some more vocabulary words about it. I had kind of four main things that I had come out to say. My pictures I have here, don't ask me. I'm just kind of quickly trying to make something now, just trying to show. Big thing about monopolistic competition is this idea of product differentiation. Things are slightly different from each other. Products are different. And so people have different choices. And so as it shows here, if the price of one thing goes up, you know, you're going to have less people buying it because they have other substitutes. That's kind of a big point. When we talked about monopoly and perfect competition, there really was no choice. You're kind of stuck buying that thing. Now we have more choices. And so because of that, your demand might go up or down based on the amount of substitutes you have. That's one key thing. I'm just kind of cutting and pasting things, and yet the words don't quite match up, but in the same size, but whatever. You have different products, you have substitutes, but at the same time, it's kind of important to keep in mind that these markets, they're pretty easy to enter. So if someone can see that, hey, there's some economic profit to be made here, even though I'm making something slightly different, the thing that I'm making is different, I might be able to take some of those customers and sell that thing too. So yes, you can say, hey, look, mine's yellow, there's blue, blue sucks, buy the yellow one. But at the same time, customers are going, yeah, but maybe the blue one's just good enough at this cheap price. So you kind of have a little monopoly in your own way because you're a product, but at the same time, there's competition. That's a key thing. This is why so many companies advertise to us. That's a key aspect of advertising. With with perfect competition and with monopoly, there really wasn't a reason to advertise because there's really no, they're all selling the same thing. There's no difference here. Now we get a lot into that here. Okay, so one of the big reasons why I wanted to do this was to talk about excess capacity. One of the things. When we've drawn these graphs before, you can kind of think of it as the area of deadweight loss. We're not going to call it deadweight loss, but it's kind of the same basic idea on the graph. You have supply, you have demand, they touch each other right there, perfect equilibrium. If you have a quantity that's less than that, you have underproduction. Quantity more than that, overproduction. And so deadweight losses, right? Well, the idea with monopolistic competition is you're not perfectly on that PPC curve all the time, right? I mean, if you're as productive as you possibly can be, you're doing the best you possibly can, working at 100% all the time, you're right on the edge of your PPC. Come on, who's really like that all the time? We're usually not doing it perfectly. And so most of the time, companies they can be producing more. They can be doing more. So imagine walking around in a mall, especially now where half of them are empty, or more than half of them, I guess. People are kind of sitting around. They're not doing everything they possibly can, as full as they possibly can all the time. So most companies, most of the time, are kind of doing the best they can, but we're human after all. We're not robots. A good example is the other day when I came back to Shanghai, I got off the subway and I walked to my apartment. And to walking to my apartment, I had to walk through a mall. And I walk into the mall and 90% of the stores are closed. The weird thing to me was looking at the stores that were actually open. You know, one of them I walked by was a beauty shop. You know, it had like beauty products and soaps and smelly crap. And I'm thinking to myself as I'm walking by, there's 3 employees sitting here. They probably had no customers all day long. The mall's totally empty. But their boss made them come in and work anyway. I don't know why, but they're there. And look, they're not working to capacity. They could be working harder. They could be producing more. They're just not doing the best they can. You imagine any mall you walk through. They're not selling something every second of the day. They're usually kind of waiting for a customer to show up. So that's the idea. There's excess capacity. You're not always doing it at the most you possibly can. You're trying your best, but that's kind of an idea. Okay, and this last one, it's much easier than it might sound. Basically, the idea is the price that you're going to set in the market is not the same as your marginal costs. You're usually not perfect. If it's a perfect market doing everything perfectly, demand is perfectly elastic. And at that point, your marginal cost, your marginal revenue, your price all equal the same thing at that output. It doesn't happen in monopoly. It doesn't happen in monopolistic competition. It doesn't happen in oligopoly either. They're not, the prices are always slightly higher than the actual marginal cost. It's very clear to see on a monopoly graph, the same thing happens here. But it's talked about often here because so much of the world is made up of monopolistic competition markets. And part of the idea is when you talk about later with efficiency, when you're writing essays, these are really great things to say. Say, look, we have product differentiation. Discuss that a little bit. You can mention how it has weak barriers. And because of these things, that's why you have these outcomes on a graph. And really great words to use to kind of summarize big ideas into a essay that you have a short amount of time to write about. Use the words excess capacity and markup over marginal cost, trying to tell you about why it's a little bit inefficient, why it's not allocatedly efficient most of the time. Okay, so there's that part, I think. Okay, a couple of key points about the graphs. In the short run, you're basically just drawing a monopoly graph. It's the exact same graph, exact same ideas. If you were to compare the two, the demand line is probably drawn a little more elastic, or in a monopoly tends to be drawn more inelastic, but you're drawing the same basic thing. That means in the short run, it is very possible for monopolistic competition to have economic profits, which is great. But remember, there's weak barriers of entry, so in the long run, things kind of change. So remember, with monopoly, short run, long run is exactly the same. There's no competition, and it's the same graph. But in the long run, with monopolistic competition, because there is, well, competition, it kind of becomes more like perfect competition. So you have a graph that's combining the perfect competition graph and the monopoly graph and combining them together to make the long run graph, which is basically just saying in the long run, you're only going to make a normal profit. So it's kind of like you're basically just drawing a monopoly graph that only has a normal profit, which is also going to tend to have excess markup and excess capacity, therefore not efficient, at least in the long run overall. So let me cut and paste a couple of graphs. As I'm doing this, I notice it's kind of choppy. Again, this is just my first time going through this, so hopefully this is working. I'll find out at the end. Okay, so graph from my PPT, just kind of going through it. Remember, it's just like Monopoly. So Step 1. Find where MC and MR equal each other. That is where you're profit maximizing. Right now, we're assuming all you're trying to do is make as much money as possible. So there you are, step 1. Now you know the quantity that's going to be sold in this market. Okay. Step 2. After you know the Q in the market, then you need to find the price in the market. Go to the Q, go up until you find price. Right there where it touches the demand curve, and now you know the price is happening, or quantity equals demand, or average revenue. To be perfectly great on a graph, to get that 7, right, D equals average revenue. There you go. So 2 steps. Step 3. You know the quantity of the market, you know the price of the market, now you need to know the cost to the company. So step 3, well, I got my Q, I'm still looking at that Q, go up to where Q equals ATC right there, and now I know the cost that it is to the company. So step 1, 2, 3, step 4, profit, which, you know, it's right there, that's what's left, or loss, depending on how you draw the graph or depending on how it's drawn, whatever. So 1, 2, 3, 4 steps every single time. True with Monopoly, true with monopolistic competition. With perfect competition, you only have 3 steps because profit is always going to be, there's no economic profit, so it's always going to be at the same spot. So there's your short run graph. Okay, what's next? Okay, I want to move this stuff out of the way. Oh, look, I need to get rid of that. Crap. Okay, there we go. So, a really key point. Since there's weak barriers to entry, that means other firms can look at that and say, hey, look, there's profit there. Look at step 4. Look at all that profit. Hey, I can make things kind of similar to this too. I want to enter this market and make some money, which means in the long run, the best that a firm is going to be able to do is make just a normal profit. In the short run, people love your stuff. You have some new product. It's amazing. People come to it. It's great. But then, you know, people get bored of it. People find another version of it. The best you can do is a normal profit. One kind of example is this video thing I'm using right now. I'm currently using Zoom to make this. Now, Zoom, great software so far. I haven't used it very much. This is the first time trying to make a video with it. Zhimu was the Chinese one that I was requesting people to use at first. It's the exact same software. The Chinese one just simply copied Zoom and tweaked it a little bit, but it's basically the same thing. And that's the thing. You can look and say, wow, we can basically copy this. We can do this too. And so they start selling things, which means Zoom kind of loses some of its profits. Imagine that with anything else you're going to buy. Any other silly little toy or ridiculous thing. I have toys around here, don't I? I'm sitting here in my living room. I have this. I'm sure I can find different versions of this or different toys or different whatever. Lately, there's been kind of a happy face one you can like play that's kind of around. Point is, you know, when it first comes out, people might buy it, might sell. It's great and wonderful, but as time goes on, you find other options, you find different things change. So you might go out of business in the long run if your prices are lower than your cost. But if you're going to stay in the long run and you're going to keep going, the best you can do is a normal profit, which means that right there. That's what it means. It means that your price is going to equal your ATC. So the graph that we just drew, can I find it again? Yeah, whoops, go stay there. Go back. Here, this graph. So let me go back to this annotation. So here, your price, right here. No, not that color. Well, doesn't matter what color at this point, does it? So this is where your price is set, right? And this price is going to be right along your demand curve. And the idea is People are looking at that and go, wow, look at all that economic profit. How wonderful. I can sell silly, stupid little hammers too, or whatever other toy, or pens or scissors or something slightly different. Maybe mine's a little bit better than the other one, whatever. So that means for this particular company that's selling these items, there's other competition. And other people buy their competition, what happens to their demand line over here, right? It goes down. Remember we did substitutes and complements? So the price of this complement goes up, which means the demand for this one shifts that way. The price of this complement goes down, the demand for this one shifts that way. Did I say complement? I think I meant to say substitute. You get the point, right? So that is exactly what's happening in this graph here. So there's economic profit to be made there. Other companies will then enter the market. They're substitutes. So demand will go over there. People will buy those other things that might be slightly cheaper, which means the demand line on this graph will go down. People will buy less of it, which means you'll be lowering your prices at the same time. You'll probably be lowering your output at the same time. And if you go out of business, that means your demand has gone below ATC. But in the long run, the best you can do is where that demand is going to be touching ATC. So in the short run, demand can be above ATC. You're making profit, wonderful. But then that's going to bring in other competition. And it's going to go all the way down until you touch ATC. If you go below ATC, in the long run, you go out of business because your costs are higher. But in the long run, if you're staying in business, the demand line is tangent, touching ATC, which is also your price. And that's the best you're going to be able to do, making a normal profit, just like in perfect competition. So let me try to draw that graph, I guess. Pause. Okay, that looks close enough. So your demand falls down until you're tangent on ATC. So here's your long run graph. So you just do the same thing. Run through your steps. Step 1. Find MR, MC. Now you have your Q. That's ugly Q. That's a better Q. Kinda. Step 2. Now you know the quantity of the market. Now you just go up to find where it touches demand, which is equal to blah, blah, blah. And now you know your price in the market. There you go. I'm scrolling up on this whiteboard trying to find the thing so I don't have to cut and paste again. So I hope that lines up okay, but whatever. Step 2. So step 3. Now you know your price, now you know your quantities, and now you need to know your costs. So where does it equal ATC? Where Q, circling Q's a lot, equals ATC. It's all right there, just like the other one in step 2, which means step 4, profit. Oh wait, what's this? No profit? Look, price and costs equal each other. Your total revenue, that P times Q, is the same as your total cost, which is the P times Q. Oh no, no profit. Oh wait, yes there is. There's normal profit. And that's the best you're going to do. So demand is going to be tangent along some line on ATC. And that is your long run graph. So short run, long run, couple of key things to point out on these graphs, going back to those 4 vocabulary words I said before. So let me erase this and kind of draw it again. Okay, so there's your 2 graphs. You got short run, which is basically a monopoly graph, and long run, which is combining the ideas of having competition, reaching only a normal profit. So getting to the welfare analysis of this and trying to talk about the excess capacity. Okay, so with excess capacity, so looking at this vocabulary definition thing here, saying that I'm producing at less than the cost minimizing output. Remember what cost minimizing output is? It's producing at the lowest possible cost, which is right there at the bottom of ATC, this brown kind of thing I'm drawing in here, which is true in the short run, and it's true in the long run. That is where you're doing things at the lowest possible cost, where marginal cost and ATC cost, ATC, touch each other. The bottom of ATC, that's doing it as cheap as you possibly can. The thing is though, Monopolistic competition, like Monopoly, they're not doing it as cheaply as they possibly can all the time. Again, think about when you're walking through a shopping mall. Are they always perfectly efficient? Are they always doing the maximum amount of output? Are they always doing it as cheaply as they can? No, we're not robots. We're humans. Not everything's perfect. That mall I walked through the other day, there's those 3 employees. Those poor 3 employees got stuck there for some reason selling beauty products when everybody's locked and quarantined inside their house. I don't think very many people are going out shopping for makeup, when they're all afraid they're going to die of the virus. So that boss was a jerk and made them go to work. And so they sat there all day, probably just playing on their phones. Look, they could have been doing more. There is more ability for things. They were not doing it at the cost minimizing output. They were not productively efficient. And that's kind of the point here. So with excess capacity is saying, look, we're not doing it as cheaply as we can. So what ends up happening most of the time is we're a little bit left to that point. That's what I try to write here. I said, you're working on the downward sloping side. So notice the brown side here, the Q is going to be to the left of it. And over here, the Q is going to be to the left of it, which means we could be doing more. We could be outputting more. But most of the time, in the short run and in the long run, we're not producing exactly at the cheapest point. We're not that efficient most of the time. That is an issue with monopolistic competition, which actually most of the world is monopolistic competition. So here's the fun little thing to think about. When we did this very simplistically, when we said supply, we said demand. We said, where they touch each other, allocate efficient. Wow, markets are awesome. Then we said, yeah, but there's inefficiencies. There's externalities. So actually, it's more efficient if you include this other thing, and this other with marginal social costs and marginal social benefit. But when you break up into the structures, monopoly, not efficient. Why would they be? They're monopolies. Oligopolies, kind of the same. Perfect competition, there is perfect, it's like in the word perfect, that's as good as you're going to get, but it doesn't really exist in real life. Most things are something in the middle, which is monopolistic competition. And most of the time, we're actually not that efficient with things. So in a very simplistic way, markets, efficient, wonderful, great. Go a little bit deeper with it, you find out, we're not really that efficient most of the time, which kind of makes sense, right? We always could be producing more. So monopolistic competition is not productively efficient. And while I'm on that point, look, allocatively efficient, where demand AR equals MC. Look, it's pink now. Right there, that's where you'd be producing if you're doing exactly what the market wants. Because remember, MC basically equals supply here, and demand, hey, look, there's demand, ta-da. And when they equal each other, there's allocatively efficient. And I didn't draw all that pretty over here. They're not the same point. Should actually be below the brown. You get the point. It's not productively efficient. It's not allocatively efficient. If you're doing what the market wanted exactly, you're doing it that much. You're doing exactly what the market wanted, you're doing it that much. So in the short run and the long run, monopolistic competition, it gets pretty close, but you're not doing exactly what the market wants all the time. We're not robots. That's like the third time I said it, right? That's the best I can come up with. So it's also not allocatively efficient. So if I wanted to try to label excess capacity here, it's not exactly deadweight loss, but it's kind of the same idea. Look, my capacity, I'm going to make a, oh, it's purple now, a Q. I could be producing here, I'm not that. So all this area here, up to that is excess capacity. I'm not producing as much as I could be. And again, at the bottom of this Q, really at the bottom of ATC, that's my the capacity, because after that I get diminishing marginal returns, not scale efficiently. But all of this here, I could say this here, this triangle, excess capacity. In other contexts, we would draw that and say that's deadweight loss. But now we're saying it's not deadweight loss necessarily, it's just not efficient. We have more capacity than we're using. We could be producing more, but we're not. It's excess capacity. So same basic idea, you can draw it essentially the same way. I had one more, right? And so to go along with that, markup over marginal cost. It's just kind of something you can kind of throw in really quickly in an essay. So let's say you're talking about monopolistic competition or monopoly in some way, or even oligopoly. You can say, well, look, monopolistic competition, it's not allocatively efficient, it's not productively efficient. Part of the reason is there's excess capacity. We're not doing everything as efficient as possible, and the cost in the market is not exactly where MR equals MC. In perfect competition, MR equals MC, which is everything's perfect. But here it's not. So let me try to draw that. Say, look, here's my marginal cost. Look, it's purple. See at that Q? So my marginal cost is, well, it's right here. Okay, there's the marginal cost kind of here. But the price in this market is right there. So this gap right here, this purple gap I'm trying to draw, this is what we call markup. As in it's a higher cost, which is what you kind of think in the market. So I'm selling beauty products at 10 RMB each. It cost me 6 RMB to make it. So the markup is 4 RMB. That's my profit I'm making. It's the same basic idea here. So with economics here, we're trying to make the point here that it's not efficient. If it was perfectly efficient, then marginal cost, marginal revenue equal each other, and it's perfect. There's no economic profit, all those things. But here, the price and the marginal cost are not exactly the same. There's a higher cost, which means we're not super efficient. That's true in the short run. That's true in the long run. See, marginal cost right there at my Q. So my marginal cost is right there, but the price in the market is there. So this gap here is called the markup. I'm only making a normal profit, but I'm still marking it up a little bit. And this other, I'm not going to draw purple. How do I change colors? How do I change colors? Where's that thing? Can't find it. Is it worth it to waste all this time? Maybe. Here it is, orange. All that area right there, I'm going to call excess capacity. And that dotted line, which was purple, and now you probably can't see it all, that's your markup. So you can draw the graphs. There's some words for you to add to the graphs. So I hope that all kind of makes sense. What else do I got to say? I should say something else. Give me a second. Oh yeah, that is like evaluation stuff. Okay. Okay, so I got really lazy on my PPT and I just kind of made one slide, and I'm still being lazy and just kind of copying it and going to talk about it here. I was so lazy I didn't even get the fonts correct, or at least matching. Anyway, this is another key thing to talk about here. This comes up in essays as a way to evaluate issues. So we can talk about excess capacity. We can talk about markup. You can draw that on a graph. That's part of your analysis. That's part of the understanding the bottom of the triangle and in getting those key things. But then you got to evaluate it and look at the whole thing. So what's interesting is supply, demand, efficient. Yes, markets, awesome. Then, okay, markets have failures, fine. But then actually markets, which are mostly monopolistic competition most of the time, actually are not allocatively efficient and not productively efficient most of the time. That's just kind of how things are. It's pretty close, but not perfect. But it gets even worse than that because we draw these graphs, these two-dimensional graphs. We put them on a board, we draw them, or we cut and paste them like I did, and say, okay, look, that's how it works. But the thing is, it's very dynamic. Things are constantly changing all the time. I haven't left my chair, but I should have brought other toys with me. But this stupid toy, I probably bought it several years ago. I think my daughter, I played with it, and I'm using it now to play with my son. There's lots of stupid toys like this. They constantly change. And so the problem is because they constantly change, it's really difficult to actually do real hardcore math about it. So we know there's mathematical equations. We know like you can draw the lines. And let's do the linear graph and do the algebra, and we got the numbers 23.596. Perfect, wonderful. But that's math. In real life, things are always moving, always adjusting. This you probably can't find in the market now because nobody cares about it anymore, because now there's other versions of it. They're constantly changing. So at any given moment, you might be able to say, aha, here's the math, here's the equation, got it. 3 days later, somebody comes out with a new product, things totally change. So I kind of just summarize it with these two things here, saying the problems with doing your welfare analysis is we have a product variety externality. It's just a short, simple way to talk about it. It's saying, yes, you have producer surplus, you have consumer surplus, we can calculate it. Look, it's this perfect area on a graph, but tomorrow there's a new product. The next day there's another new product. The next day there's another new product. How do you really capture? We know this idea of consumer surplus, it exists, we know it, but it's almost impossible to truly measure it. I mean, let me ask you, what is your marginal utility of buying this? Mine is 5. Yours might be 70. Was 5 bigger than 70 or 70 bigger than 5? We can do math, but in real life, it's really difficult. And that's the point. It's constantly changing. And because of that, since things are changing, that means, well, the business is constantly changing. So a new firm enters that market. Now your equation, it's the same basic equation, but your numbers are constantly changing. So we know there's consumer surplus. We know there's excess capacity. We know that there's some kind of deadweight loss and inefficiencies that happen. But finding the exact numbers are super, super hard because things are constantly changing. And that's kind of the point. So when you're doing an evaluation on an essay, those are kind of key things to say at the end. Makes you sound smart. Okay, what else? Okay, so last thing I think I would kind of say is like kind of a conclusion to what I just said, as writing an evaluation. Monopolistic competition, it's not as good as perfect competition from the analysis of the welfare, consumer producer surplus standpoint, all those things. There's deadweight losses, basically, excess capacity, all those things. But because of these other externalities, which I just kind of summarizing and calling them business stealing externality and product variation externality, saying there's no clear way to fix this. And is it necessarily something to fix? It's kind of great to have lots of choices. It's great things that change, but it also means resources are not perfectly rationed all the time. Does it always have to be so perfect? So again, that's a really kind of a way to kind of end that kind of evaluation. I should mention something about advertising before. Hey, what happened? Why did that happen? Nope, that's not what I want. Is it? I guess it is. When it comes to IB, these kind of things pop up, and it's a good connection to TOK classes. When it comes to advertising, truth in advertising. Is there truth in advertising? Is advertising bad? We tend to think of monopolies as bad. We tend to think of advertising as bad. But it's not necessarily always a bad thing. If you walk into a market and you see that everything is marked white and it just says corn, it says shoes, or that's the dumb one. I don't know. Water. That's a dumb one too. I don't know. Candy, and without the advertising, you don't really know what's in it. And if it's something you like or not. Advertising is a good thing. Too much of anything is a bad thing, though. And so monopolistic competition, which is what most of society structure is in, they advertise to you. Just imagine how many advertisements you probably see a day. Well, maybe not now because you're all locked up inside. Well, on your phone, I guess. Yeah, you probably get a lot of advertisements using free apps, and they're always annoying you, right? But that is something, especially when it comes to TOK classes, to connect some of these ideas. But that's really all I'm going to say. So that whole thing took me about, what, about an hour, I guess. I kind of just went through my PPT, kind of hit some of the main points. I hope that helps a little bit. I'll guess I'll make more of these or something. Okay, bye-bye.